I've adored Scooby-Doo. I've watched the cartoons for a long time. Something really weird happened to me, and I still get chills about it. It all started when I was on my tablet. I was just going through photos and videos in the gallery, mainly to delete old ones and make room for new ones. However, I decided to take a break from deleting old photos and videos, mainly because I was bored. So I went on an app called MovieBox. I've used MovieBox for at least a few years. I've watched a ton of movies on there. I looked around, found some Disney movies and other stuff. Then I found some Scooby-Doo movies. I found all my favorites mentioned before, but what caught my eye was this. There was a copy of Scooby-Doo and the Alien Invaders, but it was called Scooby-Doo and the Alien Invaders 1999 version. I was confused. Scooby-Doo and the Alien Invaders didn't exist in 1999. I decided to purchase the movie. It was around $8. I was glad it wasn't expensive to buy. I went to the kitchen to grab a snack, and after I grabbed that with a can of iced tea, I sat back on my bed. I plugged in my earbuds and the movie started. It starts off with 3 workers inside a South station. A man named Max yelled out loud when a static sound blasted his ears. A woman looked up at him. Her name was Laura. "What?" she asked him. "I got a blast from something," Max replied. He took off his headphones. Laura looked on the controls. Soon Max couldn't hear the static anymore. "Hey, what's going on?" a man named Steve said. He was a skinny guy. He walked inside and joined Max and Laura. "We just got a reading," Laura said. "A loud one. Damn, that hurt my ears," Max added. "You're kidding me," Steve said in amazement. Max couldn't find the static sound anymore, so he sighed. "Well, whatever it was, it's not there now," Max sighed. I was having memories of watching this movie as a kid. I missed being a kid. I was enjoying this movie so far. The next scene faded to Scooby and the gang in the Mystery Machine. Shaggy and Scooby were driving. They had loud music on, and it woke Velma up. "Would you mind keeping it down?" Velma asked groggily. "We're trying to sleep back here." "Like, I meant to wake you up, Velma. We're at the next town, and we better get some food," Shaggy replied. "Rah," Scooby added. Fred looked at his watch. "We ate dinner like 2 hours ago," Fred replied. Suddenly, a dust storm was starting to pick up. The gang was then blinded by a bright light. Above them, we can see an alien ship. The gang in the Mystery Machine went off-road. That's when I spotted something wrong. The Mystery Machine went off the road and into a ditch. The gang slowly got off the Mystery Machine, and luckily no one was dead. Velma had a few bruises on her along with Shaggy. They looked at their vehicle. It was totaled. Daphne climbed out with a gash on the side of her head. She was bleeding a bit. She also had shards of glass on her arms. Fred had the same thing Daphne did, but the glass shards were on his face. "Is everyone okay?" Fred asked. Everyone was okay, but they did have minor injuries. Scooby was fine as well, but he had a gash on his thigh. "Oh God, Fred, Scooby's got a gash on his thigh," Daphne pointed out. She grabbed a rag from the pocket on her shorts. She grabbed a bottle of water from the Mystery Machine. Then she walked towards Scooby. "Are you okay, Scoob?" Shaggy asked. He saw the gash. "Right rink so," Scooby replied. Daphne got the rag ready. She also put some water on a cloth. "Now, this may sting, Scooby, so I need you to stay still." She put the cloth on Scooby's wound. He flinched a bit. "Rikes," Scooby screamed. Shaggy comforted his friend. "It'll be okay, Scoob. Daphne's gonna fix that gash," Shaggy said. "We'll get you to a vet once we get to town, of course." Daphne cleaned Scooby's wound before dressing it with a rag. "That feel better?" Daphne asked Scooby. "We'll get you to a vet, and they can look at it," Daphne added. "How big was the gash, Daph?" Fred asked. "Not that big, but I would have the vet look at it," Daphne replied. "What was that?" Velma asked. "That thing, or whatever, blinded us on the road." "Was it some kind of jet?" Daphne asked. "Not like any jet I've ever seen," Fred replied. Then he had an idea. She pointed out a town. "There's a town up ahead. Maybe they can help us fix the mystery machine and see a vet for Scooby." "Great idea," Velma said. She, along with Daphne and Fred, went into town, while Shaggy and Scooby stayed by the mystery machine. Shaggy and Scooby wandered off away from the mystery machine just to fight over a Scooby snack. When they wandered off, they encountered two aliens. While Shaggy and Scooby were being chased, the theme song started to play. So far, I'm enjoying watching my childhood come back to life. After the chase scene ended, Shaggy and Scooby were inside a restaurant. Fred was using a telephone to call a mechanic to fix the mystery machine. "What's going on?" Velma asked. "Aliens are after us." Shaggy shivered with fear. Fred looked outside, but he didn't see anything or anyone. Aliens," Scooby added. Shaggy went on to details to the gang about what the aliens looked like. When he and Scooby saw donuts, they ended up starting to eat them. "What about those aliens?" Fred asked the waitress of the restaurant. "Lots of people have seen them, but how can they be real?" The waitress replied. The gang and the waitress talked about aliens when a man named Lester spoke up. "I told you they were real. I was abducted by them," Lester said. The gang turned their attention to him. The cook told Lester to shut up. He then explained that the aliens did some stuff to him. I'm not going to mention what they did to him, but let's say it was disturbing information. A lot of folks moved out, mainly because of aliens, the waitress replied to the gang. Lester told Fred, Daphne, and Velma that the aliens took him to their ship. The gang was surprised by this. Lester explained more details about his experience with them, but I couldn't hear nor understand what he said, mainly because the voice was in some sort of gibberish or something. It might have been said in another language, but I wasn't sure. "Then what happened?" Velma asked. "I don't remember, they knocked me out real good," Lester replied. Daphne shivered with fear. "Dang, that's creepy," Daphne said with chills in her voice. Fred hugged her close. "I'm not going to let them hurt you, Daphne," he said to his girlfriend. "If they do, I'll make sure it's the last thing they ever do." "No one knows if they're real or not," Lester said to the gang, "so that's why no one believes me." Lester then accidentally hit the waitress with her tray of food. It made a mess. "Lester, look what you did, you're such an idiot," the waitress scowled in anger. "Sorry," Lester said. "Now look at this piece of crap mess," the waitress growled in anger. Scooby was about to get the food, but Shaggy beat him to it and cleaned up the mess. "Since our mystery machine is broken down, a mechanic said he'll fix it sometime tomorrow," Fred said. "Is there a hotel we could all stay at?" he asked Lester. "I'm sorry, we don't have that around here," Lester said. He invited the gang to come to his house instead. He explained that he had pictures of proof that he was abducted by aliens. The next scene shows the gang at Lester's house. They all walked inside. There was a lot of neat stuff, paintings, space paraphernalia, etc. "Where can we sleep?" Velma asked. Lester offered the gang to stay at his place for the night. Lester offered a bunk bed for Daphne and Fred, and Velma got the couch. Then Shaggy and Scooby got the top of the roof on lawn chairs. The gang soon all got ready for bed. The next scene showed Shaggy and Scooby in a spaceship. They had been abducted by aliens. They caused a riot to happen. The chase went on for a minute. Then Shaggy and Scooby were both knocked out. I had no idea who or what knocked them out. It could have been one of the aliens, but I couldn't see, mainly because it happened in less than a minute. The next scene transitions to Shaggy and Scooby waking up. They were in the desert. They met a hippie woman with her dog. They asked if Shaggy and Scooby were okay. The dog the hippie had was a golden retriever. "Are you okay?" the woman asked Shaggy. "Like, we're okay," Shaggy said. He groggily woke up. "My head hurts," he said. "What are you doing out here?" the hippie asked Shaggy. Shaggy and Scooby fell in love with the girls they met. "Like hi," Shaggy said. He and Scooby were so in love. They lost their words to say. Shaggy was offered water. The hippie woman explained that she and Amber were shooting photos, mainly for a magazine. "I'm Crystal," the hippie woman introduced herself. She then introduced her dog Amber. "My name is Norville, but my friends call me Shaggy," Shaggy replied. Crystal and Amber got in their Jeep, and they offered Shaggy and Scooby a ride back into town. The next scene transitions to Fred, Daphne, Velma, and Lester at the restaurant. They couldn't find Shaggy and Scooby. The waitress walked up to Fred. "Morning, handsome. How did you sleep? Did you dream about me last night?" The waitress flirted with Fred, and this made Daphne angry. She got in between the two of them. "Hey, don't you dare flirt with my boyfriend," Daphne scowled. I was surprised by this. Daphne was mad when Lena flirted with Fred in Zombie Island. I didn't expect the waitress to flirt with Fred. Well, I hadn't seen this movie in a long time, so my mind was a bit foggy. Lester, along with Fred, Daphne, and Velma, all sat down at a booth. They saw Crystal and Amber dropping Shaggy and Scooby off. "Who's that?" Velma asked. Lester had replied to Velma that the girl and her dog had been in this town since last week. When Shaggy and Scooby walked inside the restaurant, they were lovesick. "Where have you guys been?" Fred asked. "And who was that girl?" Daphne added. "Her name's Crystal," Shaggy replied. "She's wonderful." The gang ordered breakfast as a song started to play. It was called Groovy. Shaggy and Scooby were both daydreaming about Amber and Crystal's future together. The song was great quality, so it was amazing to hear my favorite song in the movie. After the song was finished, the gang walked outside the restaurant. They walked to see a mechanic named Buck. He was fixing the mystery machine. Fred tried to talk to him, but Buck didn't listen. "Go away. Your vehicle will be fixed tonight," he growled. "Wow, what an ass," Fred muttered under his breath. Max showed up in a van. "Hey you guys, what's up?" Max asked the gang. "Nothing much," Velma replied. "What are you up to?" "Getting oil for the South dishes," Max said. The gang offered Max help unloading the oil in Max's van. They loaded up the van, and Fred commented saying it was a lot of oil. "Yeah, no kidding. These satellite dishes take up a lot," Max said. Shaggy dropped his wallet on the ground. When he went down to pick it up, his pants ripped. Fred scowled at this while Velma and Daphne laughed. "Like, my pants ripped," Shaggy said. He was blushing. Scooby handed Shaggy something to cover the rip in his pants. "Like, thanks, Scoob," he said as he patted his friend's head. Crystal and Amber showed up in their Jeep. They picked Shaggy and Scooby up. Max drove Fred, Daphne, and Velma to the South Station. The next scene fades to Shaggy and Scooby with Crystal and Amber. They were in a patch of flowers. "This is amazing, Shaggy," Crystal said. She then spotted a fence. She wanted to go over there mainly to see what it was. But when Crystal, Amber, along with Shaggy and Scooby, went over there, 2 government guards asked them to leave. The next scene transitioned to Fred and the rest of them in the South Station. They met Steve and Laura there. They explained on what they would do. "It's boring," Steve said. Velma looked at the South Station workers' boots, and they were covered in dirt. Fred explained to Max, Steve, and Laura about their car troubles. The next scene faded to Crystal along with Shaggy, Scooby, and Amber heading back to the restricted area of Scorpion Ridge. They found a cave and went inside. 2 fake government agents went inside the cave, only to not see anyone and walked away. Crystal looked at Shaggy. "Shaggy, I'm a government agent," Crystal said. He was fine with that. Amber's a training canine for government agents. Scooby was fine with that. The scene cuts to Lester with Fred, Daphne, and Velma in his truck. He was taking them to Scorpion Ridge. "I saw mud on their boots," Velma said. Daphne and Fred looked at Velma. "We did notice that," Daphne said. So far, I had been enjoying this movie. It was like I hadn't seen it before. The gang talked a bit more about Max, Steve, and Laura. "They might be up to something," Daphne added. When Lester dropped Fred and the rest off at Scorpion Ridge, this is where things started to become messed up. "I think those scientists were near water," Velma said. She looked down at the bottom of the ridge. "There might be a river down there." When Fred, along with Daphne and Velma, got down to the bottom, they looked around. "Looks like the river has dried up," Fred said to Velma. The gang all walked down the ridge. Daphne noticed tracks. "Those rocks are wet," Velma said, "but I wonder where they came from." The gang all went further in the ridge to a cave. They found gold inside. Shaggy, along with Scooby, Amber, and Crystal, also found gold on their end. "Guys, I think someone else has found this first," Crystal said. Shaggy and Scooby were bummed out by this. They wanted to be rich. Then 2 aliens showed up. Shaggy and Scooby lost their minds. Crystal and Amber began to run with them. Fred, Daphne, and Velma were also being chased by aliens too by this point. The song "Aliens Are Here" began to play as the chase scene went on for a few minutes. Fred, along with Daphne and Velma, were captured by the aliens. They were in a net. The 3 aliens walked towards them. Daphne was in rage. "You monsters," Daphne ranted. "You won't get away with this," Fred also said. "Silence," one of the aliens shouted. "You should not have entered here." "You can give up the alien crap, Steve," Velma said to one of the aliens. They all looked at each other. Then they took off their masks. The aliens were Max, Laura, and Steve in costumes. "So you've all figured it out," Steve growled. "It wasn't hard," Velma replied. "Well, it doesn't matter now," Steve replied with an evil chuckle. "Why would you guys come down here?" Daphne asked. "Are you kidding? There's so much gold down here," Laura replied to Daphne's question. "But why wouldn't you just do your job?" Velma asked. "I was doing my job, until I came upon this mine," Max began to explain. He told the gang that they had to fire 2 fake government agents just to block off the property. "You hired 2 fake MPs?" Velma asked. "That's right," Steve began. They guard the property while we mine in shifts. And you keep your easy jobs at the South Station, Velma replied. You're pretty smart, Velma, but too bad this will be the death of you, Steve said with an evil tone. Now right here, I was starting to get nervous. I didn't remember this movie being so dark. The next scene showed Shaggy, Scooby, Crystal, and Amber in the cave. They got up after sliding down a rock slide. They walked to see a dead end. They looked down to see a long way. Then the scene faded to Steve and the rest. So what was up with the alien costumes? Fred asked. Something to scare people off so they don't snoop around, Steve explained. He, along with Laura and Max, showed them the stuff they bought with the gold they mined. They made it as if an alien spaceship was real. I knew it was a fake. See, gang? Fred was cut off by a gun cocking. Steve pointed the gun at Daphne. I'm gonna shoot your girlfriend right here, Steve chuckled. You better not. I'll kill you if you do, Fred ranted. The next scene showed Scooby and the rest trapped near a dead end with the fake MPs. We've come to see if you're all right, one of the MPs said. What are you gonna do? Another of the MPs said. Shaggy and Scooby were defending Crystal and Amber. The two girls touched their peace sign necklaces. Glowing colors transformed them into aliens. The MPs were scared off. Shaggy and Scooby thought that they scared them off, and Crystal and Amber transformed back. Luckily, Shaggy and Scooby didn't see their alien forms. You scared them off, Crystal cheered. You're real tigers when you want to be. They better not mess with Shaggy or my pal Scooby, Shaggy replied. Suddenly, a loud gunshot rang, followed by Daphne's screams of pain and terror. Shaggy and Scooby's heart dropped. That loud gunshot scared the hell out of me. Zoinks, that sounded like Daphne. Shaggy and Scooby, along with Crystal and Amber, ran to save their friends. The next scene cuts to Daphne crying and bleeding. She was shot on her arm. Fred was furious. You shoot her again, and I'll rip your throat out, Fred growled as the gun was pointed to him. Try anything, and you'll be sorry, Steve said. The fake MPs ran towards Steve and the rest. They were screaming about aliens. The hell you guys talking about? Steve, along with Max and Amber, turned their attention to the fake MPs. Shaggy and the rest followed. Fred got out of the net and pulled the injured Daphne out as well. The MPs grabbed Shaggy and Scooby. They were about to hit them, but Crystal and Amber touched their necklaces again and transformed. The MPs dropped Shaggy and Scooby, and they, along with Steve and the rest, were surprised. Shaggy and Scooby turned around to see Crystal and Amber as aliens. They screamed and ran away. Laura and Steve were surprised. I don't believe it. Real aliens. If we capture these, it'll be worth more than all of this gold. Laura loved the idea and followed him. Max, along with two MPs, were backing away from the two aliens. Get the hell away from us, Max pleaded. Amber grabbed what looked like a large pipe. She tied the pipe so tight around the two MPs and Max. Steve came after Crystal and Amber with a double-barreled shotgun. I noticed the shotgun was familiar. It looked like the one from Serious Sam's first and second encounter. Steve started to shoot at Crystal and Amber. Luckily, they dodged the shots. Daphne looked to see Shaggy and Scooby hiding behind a rock. Shaggy, Scooby, those aliens are Crystal and Amber. Daphne called to Shaggy and Scooby. What are you talking about? Shaggy asked. Look at them, Velma said. Shaggy saw Crystal was trapped in a corner. Steve loaded his shotgun. Shaggy, help, Crystal in her alien form cried. "Zoinks, I'll save you." Shaggy ran towards her, only to have Steve shoot him in the hips. He fell down in pain. "Shaggy," Crystal cried as Amber grabbed Steve's shotgun and snapped it in two. "No one hurts my friends," the alien Amber spoke. She sounded like Cortana from Halo for some reason. Amber grabbed Steve and threw him across the cave. Laura had what looked like a flamethrower. It looked like the one Serious Sam uses in the second encounter. "Time to burn in hell," Laura said. She tried to set Amber on fire, but Amber dodged the flames. She grabbed the flamethrower and smashed it into bits. Laura and Steve both began to run. Fred stopped them by throwing a net on them. Crystal and Amber transformed into their own selves. The gang turned to see Shaggy. He was lying down. Crystal held him. "Hang in there, Shaggy. I can get you help." Crystal began to speak. Scooby and Amber were worried. "Crystal?" Shaggy asked weakly. "Yes, Shaggy," Crystal asked. "You're the most beautiful girl I've ever met," Shaggy said. "Shaggy, please don't do this," Crystal said with tears swelling in her eyes. "I want to confess something. Me and Amber are government agents, but not from Earth. We were sent from our world to explore here." "Why didn't you tell me?" Shaggy asked again. He coughed at this point. "I didn't know how you would react." "I can't lose you, Shaggy," Crystal sobbed. "Crystal, if I don't make it, please take care of my friends and Scooby," Shaggy said, as he soon closed his eyes. He passed out from blood loss. "Shaggy, no," Crystal cried along with Scooby and the rest. By the time Fred got off the phone with the police, he walked towards the gang. "Help is on the way." Fred paused when he saw his friends were crying. They thought that Shaggy was gone. Crystal put Shaggy down and grabbed what looked like a Tommy gun. She pointed it at Steve and Laura. "Look, I'm really sorry, Crystal," Steve stuttered. "Look what you've done. You killed Shaggy," Crystal growled. She pointed the Tommy gun at Steve's head. "Don't you all ever come near me or my friends. Ever. Again." Crystal scowled. She shot Steve and Laura, but we didn't see them actually get shot. The next scene shows Shaggy waking up in a hospital. He saw the rest of the gang. "Like, what happened?" Shaggy asked. "You were shot in your hips. The doctors performed surgery. You're fixed now," Fred replied. Shaggy hugged Crystal and Scooby. "You're okay," Crystal said. "We thought we lost you." "I'm okay, Crystal. It'll take more than that to bring me down," Shaggy replied. The next scene shows Crystal and Amber heading back to their own planet. Shaggy and Scooby were heartbroken. They got their mystery machine back. Buck apologized to the gang for his rude attitude earlier and said to them to be safe. The gang smiled as everyone left the desert town. A happy ending played, and then the movie ended. I was speechless after watching this movie. I couldn't think or say anything for a minute. It was just dark, but good at the same time. I wanted to find out how this movie existed. I decided to email the writer for Scooby-Doo, and he scheduled an interview. The interview was about 2 months later. When I got to Warner Bros. Studios, the writer invited me in one of the meeting rooms. We sat down and talked about ourselves for a bit. When I mentioned the 1999 version of the movie, he was shocked. The writer who I was interviewing with was Glenn Leopold. He said that he and 2 other writers were writing the storyline for the movie. When the movie was made, before releasing it to the public, the cast and crew watched it. They considered it to be too much and too messed up to air. It was too much to the point that they had to change everything. I wish I had some screenshots of the movie, then I could show it to you and my friends. I've never told anyone about this movie, mainly because they would think I'm insane, so I've kept it a secret for a while, but I'm not sure why I would tell anyone about this. If you want to see Scooby-Doo and the Alien Invaders from 1999, I suggest it's not a great idea. But again, if you want to, go ask one of the writers. They will show it to you.